Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video on parallel and perpendicular lines. So we're going to start off by graphing a couple of lines. Y equals 2x minus 3 and y equals 2x plus 1. So hopefully you remember from the previous lesson how to do this. This number by itself is the y-intercept. You mark that and you use this number in front of x, which is the gradient, to find a second point, and simply join them up. So we'll do y equals 2x minus 3 first. So if we go down to minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, so that is the y-intercept. So then remember what we do is we get the gradient and we use that to find a second point. So the gradient of 2 means 2 is the same as 2 over 1, means that every time you go across 1, you go up 2. So we can plot a second point there and we just draw a line through them. How easy is that? We'll just put lines on it to make sure we're indicating that goes on forever, and I'll just label that y equals 2x minus 3. Okay, now I'm going to do y equals 2x plus 1. So the y-intercept of this one here is 1. Again, the gradient's 2. So we go across 1 and up 2. So we have a second point there. And we simply need to join up those 2 points, draw a line through both of them, like this. So, once again, I'm going to put arrows on top and bottom of this line to indicate it goes forever, and I'm going to label it y equals 2x plus 1. So I plotted those 2 lines. Now, hopefully what you can see here is that these 2 lines are parallel. And that's no accident. The reason they're parallel is because they have the same gradient. So think about what parallel means. Well, parallel basically means they're going in the same direction. It means they will never meet. And if they have the same gradient, that means that they're going in the same direction. It means every time, you go across one, you go up or down by the same amount. So that's the first fact we need to know for today. Parallel lines have the same gradient. So if 2 lines have the same gradient, then they are parallel. If they don't have the same gradient, they are not parallel. So we're very precise in maths. So let's look at an example that we might do. So we might do a question like this. What is the line that is parallel to y equals 3x minus 8 that passes through the point 25? Now, we don't actually need to draw a graph for this, because we know y equals 3x minus 8, this is the gradient. It has a gradient of 3. So any line parallel to y equals 3x minus 3 also has a gradient of 3. So our line is going to be of the form y equals gradient times x plus the y-intercept. We just need to find what number goes in that box, okay? And of course, we usually call the y-intercept b. So we're going to find the value of b. So if it goes through the point 25, that means when x equals 2, x is always listed first, y is 5. So I'm just going to change y so that it's now 5, and I'm going to change x so it's now 2. And then I just simply find the value of b. So now I have the equation 5 equals 3 times 2 plus b. So of course 3 times 2 is 6, so 5 equals 6 plus b. So all I do is subtract 6 from both sides, I get b equals minus 1, right? So therefore, the equation of this line will be y equals gradient times x, it's got the same gradient, plus b, which is minus 1. Okay, so that is the answer. Y equals 3x minus 1 is parallel to this line and passes through this point. Now we're just going to look at perpendicular lines. So I'm going to get rid of all this. Please pause and copy down if you need. So for perpendicular lines, it's really easy to tell whether or not 2 lines are perpendicular. It's really hard to understand why that makes them perpendicular, and we're not really going to go through that. But I'll just give you an example. So I'm going to graph the line y equals 3x minus 2 and graph the line y equals minus a third x plus 2. Okay? So let's go ahead and graph them. So y equals 3x minus 2. So now, again, I mark the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is here. y equals minus 2. Now, gradient of 3 means every time I go across 1, I have to go up 1, 2, 3. So I'm up here. And again, I just draw a line through those 2 points. Now, for y equals minus a third x plus 2, we'll do the same thing. So this time the y-intercept is at plus 2 and a gradient of minus a third. So a third means for every 3 you go across, you need to go up or down 1. Now, because it's negative, we go across 3 to here, and instead of going up 1, we go down 1. Okay, so negative lines, lines with a negative gradient, remember, always lean to the left. So this one should lean to the left, okay? So we've got the 2 points, we now join them up. So again, I've put arrows to indicate the line's gone forever, and I've labelled the lines, okay? So these 2 lines are perpendicular, means they intersect at 90 degrees. So if that angle's 90 degrees, this angle will be 90, then this angle will be 90, and this will be 90. So that's what perpendicular means. So again, whether or not 2 lines are perpendicular is entirely dependent on their gradient, the direction in which they're going. So we know that 2 lines are parallel if their gradients are equal, but lines are perpendicular, not if their gradients are equal, but if they multiply to -1. So here, the gradient of the first line was 3, the gradient of the second line was a third, and they multiply to -1. Again, why that is the case is complicated, and we're not going to go through that. So that's how you check whether 2 lines are perpendicular or not. If their gradients multiply to -1, they're perpendicular, otherwise they're not perpendicular. So another way I can write that, so they're perpendicular if gradient of the first line times gradient of the second line equals -1. Another way to write that is if the gradient of the first line is -1 divided by the gradient of the second line. And that will be really helpful when you have to find the gradient. So I'm going to go through an example. Again, I'm going to get rid of this stuff, so please pause and copy down if you need. So I've left the definition up for you. We're going to have a look at this question. What is the equation of the line perpendicular to y equals minus 2x plus 6 that passes through the origin? So firstly, we're going to find the gradient of this line. So the gradient of the first line here, you can see, is minus 2. So the gradient of the second line, using this formula here, is just going to be minus 1 divided by minus 2. Which is positive 1/2. Note that -2 times positive 1/2 does equal -1. Therefore, the lines will be perpendicular. So the equation of the line will be y equals mx plus b. We know it passes through the origin. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace x coordinate with 0. And we're going to do the same for y because it goes through the origin. Y will be replaced with 0. So we're left with 0 equals 1/2 times 0 plus b. And that just means that 0 equals b. So the equation of the line will just be y equals 1/2 x plus 0. You don't even need to write the plus 0. So that's the answer. Y equals 1/2 x is perpendicular to this line and passes through this point. So just before I go, just a really quick note, lines cannot be both parallel and perpendicular. If 2 lines are perpendicular, they must meet, therefore they can't be parallel. Conversely, if 2 lines are parallel, they don't meet, therefore they cannot be perpendicular. All right, hope you've enjoyed this video. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.